Hello my friends, and welcome back. In today's video, we're gonna look at a commit that went into the latest release of Komorebi, the tiling window manager for Windows, which is written in the Rust programming language. So unfortunately, I did not have the camera recording for this commit. I felt very rushed when I was doing this. There's a bit of a story behind this, but first let me find it and pull it up. Colors. Here it is. So let's take a look at the commit message, make it nice and big so everybody can read along. Feature config allow colors in both RGB and hex. This commit introduces the ability for users to specify colors in the static config file in either RGB or hex format. This is done by introducing a new enum, color, which provides variance wrapping the internal RGB type and the hex color type from the hex color crate. So why don't we rewind a little bit? A couple of weeks ago, there was a hard fork of Komorebi. It was not at a great time, to be honest. It was the first week of my new job. I was not able to be online much, on Discord much, respond to issues, discussions, PRs. And a hard fork with breaking changes was made. One of those breaking changes was changing the color format used to hex. So if I go ahead and get up my config here, so until now, or until the last release, the colors were given to Komorebi in the user config file like this, right? Let me just highlight that block, RGB. And the reason why it's in RGB is because actually you have to do this really crazy mapping to an unsigned 32-bit integer. It's really wild, but it's the way that you pass it to, here it is. The way that you pass a color to the Windows API is like this. You have RGB, and then I think this is called bit shifting. So you give the R, you have to I hope that I'm using the right term, bit shift G by 8, and then bit shift B by 16. And that gives you a single unsigned 32-bit integer that represents a color. And so that's kind of what went into the user interface here, right? You give an RGB value, and then Komorebi under the hood finds this magic unsigned 32-bit integer, and then at the end you get your color. A lot of web development really eschews this RGB format for the hex format. The hex format is very popular, especially in web-related technologies. So in the hard fork, goodbye RGB, hello hex. And I thought this is actually a really cool feature. Like, it'll make it a lot more approachable for people to have cool configs with color schemes and all that. And I was like, yeah, this is cool, but it's kind of a crappy move to break the configuration files of everybody who has been using RGB until now. And this is something that I feel very, very strongly about. And in fact, I added a little blurb onto the end of the README about this. So there's a new contribution guide here, contribution guidelines. But right at the end, we have a section entitled "Breaking changes to user-facing interfaces are unacceptable. No user should ever find that their configuration file has stopped working after upgrading to a new version of Komorebi." This is very, very important to me, because I had quite a few experiences with tiling window managers on macOS where I would do an upgrade and things would stop working because commands had been dropped, commands had been renamed, just these kind of silent breaking changes. I really don't want that for Komorebi. I feel like once you have a config that works for you, I want it to work for you until version 1. That's the dream. If we ever get to a stable version 1, I really, really want your config files to just keep working. If you have a config file from version, 0.1.10, I want it to largely work the same way if you upgrade to version 0.1.22. Even if you're not using any of the new features, all of the old features that you were using at the time of 0.1.10 and the configuration for them, it should continue. That's whether you're using auto hotkey, whether you're using PowerShell to configure, or whether you're using the static configuration file. So I say, actually, for some inspiration, look at this commit, which we're going to take a look at, because more often than not, there are ways to reformulate changes that may initially seem like they require breaking user interfaces. Oh my god. It's late. Let's try that again. More often than not, there are ways to reformulate changes that may initially seem like they require breaking user-facing interfaces into additive changes. So what does that look like in practice? Well, it looks like this commit. I think this is a really good example. So here, another little blurb, just since we are talking about colors specifically. The core representation for colors in Komorebi remains the RGB struct, and any hex specified colors will be converted to this RGB type before being converted to an unsigned 32-bit integer to pass that color along to, the various Win32 API calls. So let's take a look at some code. We'll come back to this because this is also an interesting thing that you might not know if you're fairly new to Rust. But now, we previously had just the RGB struct. Alright, why don't we just go through line by line. So previously, as you can see here, we just had this RGB, right? And it would be a single struct with 3 members, R, G, and B, and that would be it. It was this one. And so now what we've done is we have wrapped that into an enum called color. And this enum has 2 variants, RGB, which is a wrapper around an RGB type, and hex, which is a wrapper around a hex type. And we've implemented some from traits here. So we can go from RGB for color. So if you have an RGB, then we're just going to call self. So this is color, self RGB, and then the value. So we're just wrapping our RGB value in the color enum. And here we also implement from U32 for color. And if we have an unsigned 32-bit integer, which is what Windows takes, we'll call the from of RGB, which was already implemented before, and then we will wrap that from on that U32 in a RGB variant of the color enum. So far, so good, I hope. Next, we have pub struct hex, which is a wrapper around hex color. So hex color comes from the hex color crate. The reason I had to do this, wrapping it in a new struct, this is called the new type pattern if you want to go and look this up afterwards. So the reason we have this new struct that seems kind of pointless is because, let me bring this up to the top, it is not possible to implement traits on structs that you don't own. So we don't own the hex color struct, right? The hex color crate owns that, and we're just importing it. So we can't implement JSON schema for hex color, but we can implement JSON schema for hex, which we have declared here and we own. So this is a really basic thing. Usually you can derive JSON schema. It's derivable on a whole bunch of stuff. Every now and then you come across a crate where, you know, you have to wrap it in a new type. If ever you need to do this, these are the only two things that you need to worry about. So you need to have the name for it, which here is hex. And hopefully if it's just a simple type like this, maybe we can do a unified commit here, just to make this a bit easier to read. Where were we? Here. So you basically just need to return a schema object, and here it's going to be of type string. So when we are generating the JSON schema for the completions and stuff, it says, oh, this field in the completions is hex and it's of type string. From color for U32. Right, so what is happening here is we want to be able to get an unsigned 32-bit integer from any color, whether it's an RGB or it's a hex. So we have already defined how to change our RGB into a U32. I think that was here, right? Where you do the bit shifting. So we just do that, right? We do into. However, if we want to do that for hex, first we are going to convert that hex value into RGB, and then we're just going to call into again. So we're doing hex into RGB and then RGB into U32. We have our RGB struct here that we all know, and I don't think anyone besides me loves this. It's just how I think about color in RGB. But this is the one that you all know. This is the one that is represented here in the config. We have our from hex for RGB. Luckily, the hex color type, maybe we can get this up here. And so underneath this, hex color has its own RGBA, and you can convert to and from hex color from RGB, hex color from. It's got a from implementation anyway. I'm not sure which one it is, but it does work. So we can go, when the value is hex, it is wrapping the hex color. So we do value.0, that gives us hex color, and then we can call into. And that gets us a nice RGB, but actually, that into is calling this into from hex color for RGB, So this into is calling this. And we have the hex color, which has an RGB, but those RGBs are U8s, I believe. Yes. So we're just setting R, G, and B, but as U32. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So I was able to go and update. We were doing this bit shifting everywhere, which was kind of ugly. So now we can just do, RGB new into. That's very nice. Here we removed, I think this was previously in the static config file. We moved that out into its own color file. And now we were able to update all of the active window border colors. So here in the config, this bit, right, we were able to update all of these references to RGB to references with color. And what that means is, I don't know why you would want to do this. I just did this for illustrative purposes. You can actually mix and match, right? If you have like your color for the single container stack, so this blue, you can have that in RGB. If you have a stack, so let me go ahead and stack here. Hey, look, then it's this color in hex. Why don't I just go ahead and look that up? Yeah, it's that color. Same deal. And you can go back to RGB. You can go backwards and forwards, and basically the reason why I prefer taking a little bit of time and doing it like this is because, like, look, now if you don't want to update your config to change everything to hex, even though it might be a little more convenient, you might be more used to it, you don't have to. You have a working config. You can leave it. You don't... I don't think... Or how do I want to phrase this? I don't want to build the kind of software that people have to constantly go and change the configuration for when a new update comes out. Like, if people want to go and play around and rice and make everything, very particular to their setup, more power to you. If you're happy, I'm happy. But I don't want it to be an imposition from my end. I find it very... So as an end user myself of various pieces of software, I find it very disrespectful to the end user. And that's why in my own efforts as a software developer for end users that are not myself, I know what it feels like to be disrespected as an end user in design choices, and I don't want to treat the end users of my software that way, because that is not cool. That is not cool at all. Yeah, and then so now when we update askschema.json, instead of requiring RG and B, it can be any of. It can be color represented as RGB, or it can be color represented as hex, which is of type string. And that type string, if we just zoom back up, that is here because we implemented JSON schema for our hex new type. Oh my, that was a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. I wasn't in a good place when I was writing this code. I was in a particularly good mood. It's probably better that I did not record that and that I got to explain this lovely approach in a much better mood. Alright, we're going to get back to some development on the next video. There are a couple of things that I would like to tackle. You know what? I'll leave that for the next video. I will leave you all in suspense for the next video. So, why don't we go ahead and say thank you to all of the lovely sponsors of this project. We are nearly, by the way, we're nearly at 20 monthly sponsors, which is actually the goal. If you are the 20th and you help us reach this goal, the next video, if we get 20 by the next video will be dedicated to you, 20th monthly subscriber. All right, so starting from this end, thank you to Azine, James, Pavel, EFL1P, private sponsor number 1, Maxwell, Jairo. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing that right. Please let me know in the comments. DM1681, Red Lobster, Darian, Kwang, Surefire, Solomon, Alex, private sponsor number 2, Evan, who does not sucks, Evan rocks, Alex, Julian, and Hisayuki. Thank you all so very much, my friends. It really means a lot to me, and especially on those bad days. Your support helps to keep me going. I'm supposed to say something else here. If you would like to become a sponsor, head on over to the sponsor page. You can become a one-time sponsor. You can become a monthly sponsor. Right now, you could be the final, that 5% that gets us to 20 monthly sponsors. Honestly, even if it's just $1 a month, it makes a huge difference to me. If, however, you are not in a position to become a sponsor, the very next best thing that you can do is make sure that you are subscribed to the YouTube channel. Last year, it was a long road to 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 watch hours, but we got there. We are now fully monetized, which means that all your views on these videos, or your likes, or your comments, every second of ad that you watch before you hit skip, it results in some passive income that goes towards the project. And right now that's just like a couple of cents a day, but you know what? It's such a simple, easy, passive way for you to support the project. So I hope that you will do that. If you like these videos, keep coming back and watching the videos. And yeah, who knows who the next video will be dedicated to. Alright, my friends, I think that is it for today. So, my friends, I hope that whatever you all do today, you have a great day. Free Palestine, and I'll see you all back here next time.